The biggest mistake you can make is assuming you already know who someone is. The words echoed through the afternoon air only seconds before two uniformed officers escorted a calm, middle-aged black man across the front entrance of the federal building as dozens of people stopped to watch. Office workers paused halfway down the concrete steps, tourists slowed beside the polished granite fountain, and courthouse employees glanced through the tall glass windows, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. The man never struggled. He never raised his voice. Instead, he looked directly at the senior officer and spoke with remarkable composure. "You still have time to verify my identity." Sergeant Ryan Cooper barely acknowledged the statement. His attention remained fixed on procedure as he directed the officers toward a waiting patrol vehicle parked beneath the bright July sun. The digital clock mounted high above the Federal Plaza quietly displayed 1:07 p.m. For hours remained before an entirely different story would begin. Warm air shimmered above the pavement while American flags hanging from nearby buildings moved gently in the afternoon breeze. The city carried on as if nothing extraordinary were happening. Buses arrived on schedule. Couriers pushed loaded carts across the sidewalk. Business executives hurried through revolving doors while speaking into wireless headsets. Yet nearly everyone who witnessed the scene reached the same conclusion within seconds. They believed they were watching another routine arrest. Only one person standing there understood how serious the mistake truly was. Marcus Hayes lowered his eyes briefly as he was guided toward the patrol vehicle. His plain charcoal jacket concealed the credentials that could have explained everything. But those credentials were part of an active undercover assignment that required strict protocol before being revealed. He had repeated the same request 3 separate times. Contact the Federal Bureau of Investigation Field Office. Verify my identification through official channels. Speak with my supervising agent. Every request had been dismissed before anyone bothered to confirm the facts. Marcus inhaled slowly, allowing the familiar discipline developed through years of federal service to steady his thoughts. Panic solved nothing. Anger solved even less. Experience had taught him that truth rarely needed loud voices. It only needed enough time to arrive. Across the street, a city surveillance camera continued scanning the intersection with mechanical precision. Above the federal entrance, multiple security cameras quietly recorded every movement beneath the stone columns. A delivery van paused at the traffic light, its dashboard camera continuously preserving the scene through the windshield. Nearby, a young legal assistant instinctively lifted her phone after noticing how calmly the man continued speaking despite the growing attention surrounding him. None of those silent witnesses cared about uniforms, titles, or assumptions. They simply recorded what happened exactly as it unfolded. Sergeant Cooper closed the patrol vehicle door and exchanged a brief conversation with another officer before climbing into the driver's seat. He believed the situation had already been resolved. Marcus rested quietly in the back seat, watching sunlight flicker across the window as the vehicle pulled away from the Federal Plaza. The digital clock disappeared behind them, still displaying 1:07 p.m. No one watching from the sidewalk realized they had just witnessed the opening moments of a decision that would soon ripple through an entire police department, disrupt a major federal investigation, and cost a city far more than anyone could possibly imagine. Marcus Hayes had spent nearly 2 decades learning that the strongest investigations were built on patience rather than pride. At 41 years old, he had earned a reputation inside the Federal Bureau of Investigation as someone who listened longer than he spoke and observed details other people ignored. His office walls displayed no trophies or dramatic photographs, only neatly organized case files and a framed picture of his 16-year-old daughter, Emily, smiling beside the Chesapeake Bay during a weekend fishing trip. Whenever difficult assignments stretched into long nights, that photograph reminded him why. Integrity mattered more than recognition. Marcus believed every badge, whether local, state, or federal, represented a promise to protect the public instead of personal authority. That belief had guided every decision throughout his career. The assignment bringing him to the Federal Plaza that afternoon was unlike anything he had handled before. For almost 11 months, he had quietly worked alongside financial analysts, prosecutors, and forensic accountants investigating a network of suspected public corruption involving government contracts worth millions of dollars. Very few people knew his identity outside the investigative team because the operation depended on discretion. Instead of wearing a jacket marked with large federal lettering, Marcus dressed like an ordinary government employee, carrying only the identification required under strict operational procedures. His instructions were simple. Meet a confidential source inside the federal building at 1:30 in the afternoon, review newly discovered financial records, then return to the field office before the evening briefing. Every minute had already been carefully scheduled. As the patrol vehicle moved steadily through downtown streets, Marcus remained composed despite understanding exactly what the delay could cost. His concern was not personal embarrassment. It was the confidential source waiting inside the federal building without knowing why the meeting had suddenly been abandoned. Investigations built over months could unravel because of a single missed appointment. He calmly looked towards Sergeant Ryan Cooper through the protective partition and spoke in the same measured tone he had used since the encounter began. He explained once again that a simple verification through the local Federal Bureau of Investigation field office would answer every remaining question. He even provided the publicly listed switchboard number from memory, inviting the officers to confirm his identity through official channels instead of relying on assumptions. His words were respectful, precise, and completely consistent. Outside the patrol vehicle, the city continued its ordinary rhythm beneath the warm summer sky. Construction workers poured fresh concrete beside a courthouse annex while cyclists crossed painted intersections and families pushed strollers through shaded sidewalks lined with oak trees. The sounds of distant traffic blended with church bells echoing from an old brick cathedral several blocks away. Life moved forward without realizing that an important federal operation had quietly stopped moving with it. Marcus glanced at the digital clock on the dashboard as the patrol vehicle turned toward the police station. 1:13 in the afternoon. Only 6 minutes had passed since leaving the plaza, yet the schedule carefully built over nearly a year was already slipping beyond recovery. Still, his breathing remained steady. Experience had taught him that panic clouded judgment, while patience often revealed the truth. High above the intersection they had just crossed, another city camera silently captured the patrol vehicle continuing toward its destination, preserving another ordinary moment that would soon become an extraordinary piece of a much larger story. Sergeant Ryan Cooper had worn a badge for more than 22 years, long enough to believe that experience could answer questions before evidence ever arrived. Inside the department, he was known for making quick decisions during uncertain situations, a reputation that had earned both praise and quiet criticism over the years. Younger officers admired his confidence, while veteran supervisors occasionally reminded him that confidence and certainty were rarely the same thing. Cooper considered hesitation a liability. He believed that people revealed the truth through body language long before official records confirmed it. That belief had become the foundation of his daily work, shaping thousands of encounters across 2 decades of patrol assignments. As the patrol vehicle approached the station, Cooper glanced into the rearview mirror and studied Marcus with the same quiet certainty he had carried since the encounter began. He saw a calm man dressed in ordinary clothes who claimed to be a federal agent, yet carried no visible credentials. To Cooper, the story sounded carefully rehearsed. He convinced himself that anyone could memorize the name of a federal office or repeat procedures found online. Experience, he believed, had protected him from deception many times before, and he saw no reason to question his own judgment now. The station parking lot slowly came into view beneath the bright afternoon sky. Patrol vehicles lined one side of the building, while civilian cars filled the remaining spaces. Officers moved between entrances carrying reports, speaking over portable radios, and greeting one another with familiar nods as another ordinary shift continued. Inside the building, telephones rang steadily behind the front desk, while dispatchers monitored calls from across the city. Nothing about the afternoon suggested that one routine decision had already begun creating consequences far beyond the station walls. Cooper parked the vehicle, gathered his paperwork, and briefly spoke with another officer assigned to assist with processing. He explained that the individual claimed to be a Federal Bureau of Investigation special agent working undercover, but that he believed the story required further investigation before accepting it as true. Marcus listened quietly without interrupting. Once again, He respectfully requested that the local Federal Bureau of Investigation field office be contacted through its publicly listed number before any additional steps were taken. He even explained that his supervising agent would immediately verify his identity and assignment. Cooper acknowledged hearing the request, but chose to continue with his own process first, convinced that verification could wait until later. Around them, sunlight streamed through the station lobby windows, casting long reflections across the polished tile floor. Citizens waiting for routine services quietly filled out paperwork while a television mounted high on the wall displayed local afternoon news with the volume turned low. Outside, an American flag moved gently in the summer breeze above the entrance, and a courthouse clock several blocks away quietly marked another passing minute. Marcus looked toward the clock through the glass doors as 1:22 appeared on its illuminated face. Time continued moving with perfect consistency, even as an important federal investigation remained frozen. Somewhere across town, confidential documents waited unopened. Investigators searched unsuccessfully for the missing lead agent, and a carefully coordinated operation drifted farther away from its planned schedule. Cooper remained convinced he had everything under control. What he could not see was that every decision being made inside the station was already becoming part of a much larger timeline that cameras, official records, radio transmissions, and witness statements would eventually reconstruct with remarkable precision. Inside the station, the afternoon settled into a rhythm so ordinary that no one realized how extraordinary the next few hours would become. Officers moved through the hallways carrying case folders and coffee cups while dispatch radios crackled softly with routine calls from across the city. Marcus Hayes remained composed, answering every question with quiet precision and never allowing frustration to replace professionalism. He understood the importance of lawful procedure better than almost anyone in the building because he had spent his career enforcing it from the federal side. Looking directly at Sergeant Ryan Cooper, Marcus calmly repeated the same request he had made since the encounter began. Please contact the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office through the public switchboard. Ask for my supervising agent. They will confirm everything. His voice carried neither anger nor fear. Only the confidence of someone who knew the truth required nothing more than proper verification. Cooper listened without interruption, then shook his head slightly. He believed the verification could wait until the station completed its own process. In his experience, people often claimed impressive titles when confronted with difficult situations, and he had convinced himself that caution meant refusing to accept Marcus's explanation without completing every local procedure first. Marcus quietly nodded, refusing to argue. He knew that raising his voice would not change anyone's opinion. Instead, he carefully explained that delaying verification would affect more than his personal situation. A confidential meeting scheduled inside the federal building had already been missed, and members of an active investigative team would soon begin searching for the missing lead agent. He spoke factually, never revealing sensitive information about the operation itself, only emphasizing that time mattered. Cooper acknowledged hearing every word, yet continued moving through paperwork already spread across the processing desk. Outside the station, the summer afternoon remained bright and peaceful. Sunlight reflected from the windows of nearby office buildings, while courthouse employees crossed the street carrying briefcases toward late lunch meetings. Delivery trucks unloaded supplies behind restaurants. Children laughed in a neighborhood park several blocks away, and church bells quietly announced the half-hour. Ordinary life continued with remarkable calm, while an unseen countdown moved steadily forward. Inside the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office across town, several agents gathered around a conference table waiting for Marcus to arrive with critical financial records connected to the ongoing corruption investigation. At first, they assumed traffic had delayed him. 15 minutes later, phone calls went unanswered. By 1:45 in the afternoon, concern replaced inconvenience. Marcus had never missed an operational deadline without communication. His supervising agent instructed analysts to begin checking hospitals, vehicle accidents, and official law enforcement notifications, while another investigator reviewed the last confirmed location transmitted before Marcus's phone stopped responding. Back inside the station, Marcus glanced toward the wall clock. 1:48. Every passing minute widened the gap between assumption and reality. Through the lobby windows, security cameras silently recorded officers entering and leaving the building, while body cameras resting on charging stations preserved digital timestamps that would later become important pieces of a much larger timeline. Marcus folded his hands, took one slow breath, and patiently waited. He had done everything the right way. Now the truth depended entirely on whether someone else would finally choose to verify facts instead of trusting assumptions. By 2:30 in the afternoon, the quiet confidence inside the police station had begun to crack, even though no one had admitted it aloud. Telephones rang more frequently than usual, dispatchers exchanged longer conversations over their headsets, and supervisors started asking routine questions that produced unusually uncertain answers. Marcus Hayes remained composed, seated exactly where he had been instructed, watching the second hand of the wall clock complete another slow circle. He had spent years investigating complex financial crimes where a single missing hour could erase months of careful preparation. Now he understood that every minute passing inside the station carried consequences reaching far beyond the building itself. Across town, the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office had officially shifted from concern to operational response. Marcus's supervising agent reviewed the secure scheduling system one final time, confirming that every meeting, every assignment, and every communication matched Marcus's carefully documented itinerary. There was no unexplained deviation. Surveillance analysts traced the final authorized location of his government-issued vehicle near the Federal Plaza before all routine contact abruptly stopped. Administrative personnel contacted local agencies requesting information, while investigators quietly assembled a timeline that grew more troubling with every passing minute. The confidential source waiting inside the federal building had already departed after receiving instructions that the meeting could no longer proceed. Financial records expected to support several federal search warrants remained unopened inside a secured evidence envelope because only Marcus possessed the necessary chain of custody documentation. A coordinated operation involving prosecutors, forensic accountants, and investigators from multiple agencies was now suspended, not because of missing evidence, but because the lead agent responsible for authorizing the next phase could not be located. Back inside the station, Marcus respectfully made the same request once again. He asked Sergeant Ryan Cooper to contact the Federal Bureau of Investigation through the publicly available field office number. He explained that the verification would require only a few minutes and would immediately clarify the situation. His words remained steady, professional, and completely consistent with everything he had said since the encounter began. Cooper listened quietly before replying that the station would complete its own review first. He remained convinced that waiting a little longer presented no meaningful risk. Marcus lowered his eyes briefly, not in defeat, but in quiet disappointment. He understood that procedure without verification could become as dangerous as assumption without evidence. Outside, heavy summer clouds slowly drifted across the afternoon sky, softening the sunlight that had poured through the station windows earlier in the day. Long shadows stretched across the parking lot, while patrol vehicles continued arriving and departing on ordinary service calls. Security cameras above every entrance silently recorded each officer walking through the doors, preserving timestamps accurate to the second. Body cameras resting in charging docks automatically synchronized digital logs with the department server. Dispatch recordings archived every radio transmission without interruption. None of those systems cared about opinions. They simply preserved facts. At exactly 3 o'clock, a quiet message reached the desk of Marcus's supervising agent confirming that city surveillance footage had captured his last known location outside the Federal Plaza before local officers transported him away. Within moments, federal officials began comparing public records, dispatch logs, and camera timestamps. The missing pieces were beginning to align. The countdown that no one inside the station believed existed was quietly approaching the moment when every unanswered question would finally receive an undeniable answer. The station grew noticeably quieter as the afternoon stretched toward 4 o'clock, not because fewer people were inside, but because uncertainty had begun replacing routine confidence. Conversations became shorter. Telephones remained on desks a little longer after each call ended. Even the familiar sounds of keyboards and printers seemed softer beneath the weight of unanswered questions. Marcus Hayes sat patiently, his posture unchanged, watching thin rays of sunlight filter through the narrow window and slowly slide across the polished floor. The golden light marked time more honestly than any clock. He thought briefly about his daughter Emily finishing summer volunteer work at the community center, probably wondering why her father had not answered a single message. The thought settled quietly in his heart, yet it did not disturb the discipline he had practiced throughout his career. He had learned that calm decisions were strongest when surrounded by uncertainty. Across the city, inside the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office, the atmosphere looked entirely different. Digital maps covered conference room monitors while analysts compared traffic camera timestamps with dispatch records, vehicle tracking logs, and security footage from the Federal Plaza. Every new piece of information pointed toward the same conclusion. Marcus had never disappeared. He had simply been taken away before anyone completed the most basic verification. His supervising agent stood beside a conference table covered with printed timelines and quietly instructed the team to preserve every available record, including public surveillance footage, dispatch audio, station communications, and body camera metadata. No one raised their voice. Years of investigative experience had taught them that facts carried far more authority than emotion. Back inside the police station, Sergeant Ryan Cooper reviewed paperwork one more time, convinced that he had followed procedure correctly. Yet something continued to trouble him. Marcus had never changed his explanation. He had never contradicted himself. Every request had been consistent from the very beginning. Verify my identity. Contact the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office. Speak with my supervising agent. Cooper slowly looked toward the interview room where Marcus remained seated with remarkable patience. For the first time all afternoon, certainty gave way to hesitation. He quietly asked another officer whether anyone had attempted the verification Marcus repeatedly requested. The answer came after an uncomfortable pause. No official call had been made. Outside, the summer breeze carried scattered leaves across the station parking lot as dark clouds drifted between the afternoon sun and the city skyline. Security cameras above each entrance continued recording every arrival and departure, while digital servers automatically stored timestamps accurate to the second. Hundreds of ordinary moments passed through those systems every day without attracting attention. Yet today, every second was quietly becoming evidence. At exactly 4:52 in the afternoon, several dark sport utility vehicles entered the station parking lot with calm, deliberate precision. They did not arrive with urgency or spectacle. They simply rolled to a smooth stop beneath the fading sunlight. Men and women wearing professional business attire stepped out carrying secure document cases instead of raised voices. Their identification remained visible only long enough for the front desk officer to recognize the familiar federal credentials. Inside the station, conversations stopped almost instantly. Marcus slowly lifted his eyes toward the front hallway as measured footsteps echoed across the tile floor. Without saying a single word, he understood that the truth had finally arrived, and unlike assumptions, it had come carrying documentation, verified timelines, and every unanswered fact needed to change the course of the entire day. The arrival of the federal team changed the atmosphere before anyone spoke a single word. The station lobby, filled only moments earlier with ordinary conversations and ringing telephones, settled into complete silence as several senior Federal Bureau of Investigation officials calmly presented their credentials to the desk supervisor. There were no raised voices, no dramatic gestures, and no accusations. Professionalism replaced uncertainty with remarkable speed. The supervising agent leading the group requested immediate access to Marcus Hayes and quietly asked that all dispatch recordings, security camera footage, body camera files, visitor logs, and communication records connected to the afternoon's events be preserved exactly as they existed. The request was delivered with the calm confidence that comes from knowing the facts already exist. Sergeant Ryan Cooper watched from several feet away as the federal supervisor introduced himself and explained that Marcus Hayes was the lead special agent assigned to an active public corruption investigation authorized months earlier through federal court orders. A secure folder was opened on the front counter containing assignment documents, operational authorizations, identification records, and a detailed timeline matching every statement Marcus had repeated throughout the afternoon. Every page confirmed the same truth. Marcus had identified himself honestly from the beginning. He had repeatedly requested verification through official channels. He had provided the correct public contact information for the field office. Verification had always been available. It had simply never been requested. Within minutes, investigators from both agencies began reviewing the digital record created throughout the day. Security cameras outside the Federal Plaza showed Marcus arriving alone exactly as scheduled before speaking calmly with responding officers. Surveillance footage from surrounding buildings confirmed his repeated requests to contact the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office. Dashboard camera recordings documented the transport from the plaza to the station while preserving each conversation with precise timestamps. Body camera files, synchronized automatically with department servers, showed Marcus remaining respectful, cooperative, and consistent from beginning to end. Dispatch audio confirmed that no official verification request had ever been transmitted to the field office despite multiple opportunities. When the separate recordings were placed into one continuous timeline, they aligned with remarkable precision. Every minute supported Marcus's account. Every timestamp reinforced the sequence of events. Every independent source told the same story without contradiction. Sergeant Cooper slowly lowered his eyes toward the paperwork resting on the counter. For the first time that afternoon, he understood that confidence had never been the same as certainty. A simple verification call lasting only a few minutes could have prevented everything that followed. Across the room, Marcus stood quietly after the federal supervisor greeted him with a respectful handshake. Neither man celebrated the moment. They immediately turned their attention toward the suspended investigation, reviewing how the unexpected delay had interrupted scheduled interviews, postponed search warrant executions, and forced multiple investigative teams to halt coordinated operations. Financial analysts, prosecutors, and technical specialists had all been waiting for the lead agent who never arrived because the verification he requested had never occurred. The station remained silent as every person present realized the afternoon would now be examined through official investigations, preserved evidence, and documented timelines rather than assumptions. The truth had not arrived through emotion or argument. It had arrived through records, cameras, procedure, and facts that could neither be rewritten nor ignored. The days that followed transformed one afternoon inside a police station into a case study examined far beyond city limits. Federal investigators, municipal attorneys, and independent oversight officials began reconstructing the entire sequence of events using every available source of documentation. Security camera recordings, dispatch audio, body camera metadata, station entry logs, radio transmissions, and written reports were carefully synchronized into a single timeline accurate to the second. Every review reached the same conclusion. Marcus Hayes had identified himself truthfully from the beginning, repeatedly requested official verification through established channels, and remained cooperative throughout the encounter. The investigation shifted away from one mistaken decision and toward a broader examination of policy, supervision, communication, and accountability. Sergeant Ryan Cooper cooperated fully with investigators, answering questions and reviewing every recorded interaction without attempting to change the documented facts. As the evidence became impossible to dispute, department leadership acknowledged that the failure had not resulted from missing information, but from the decision to delay a simple verification that could have resolved the entire situation within minutes. Internal reviews expanded beyond one supervisor, examining every officer involved in the chain of decisions that afternoon. Over the following weeks, disciplinary findings were issued according to department policy and applicable law. Ultimately, 18 officers either lost their badges or separated from the department through disciplinary actions connected to the investigation and related findings. Civil litigation and contractual delays followed, while postponed federal operations, legal settlements, administrative costs, and canceled development agreements combined to create financial consequences estimated at approximately $10 million for the city. The numbers appeared in reports and public meetings, but Marcus rarely discussed them. Whenever reporters requested interviews, he politely declined lengthy statements. He believed the story had never been about personal vindication. It had always been about protecting the integrity of institutions that citizens trusted every day. During one brief public appearance beside federal and local officials announcing new verification procedures, Marcus spoke only a single sentence before stepping away from the podium. Accountability protects everyone because fairness is strongest when it applies equally. The room remained silent for several seconds after he finished speaking. Those few words carried greater weight than any prepared speech. Across the city, new training programs required officers to complete identity verification procedures before reaching conclusions in comparable situations. Academy instructors incorporated real timelines, documented communication records, and verified evidence into classroom discussions, reminding new recruits that patience often prevented mistakes confidence alone could never repair. Sergeant Ryan Cooper watched portions of the training during administrative review, quietly recognizing how differently the afternoon could have unfolded if one telephone call had been placed at the very beginning. Marcus returned to his federal responsibilities without seeking recognition or revenge. The suspended investigation resumed, confidential evidence was secured, and the operation moved forward under revised schedules. As evening sunlight reflected across the glass exterior of the federal building where everything had begun, the same security cameras continued recording ordinary people entering and leaving through the front doors. They remained silent observers, preserving moments without opinion or prejudice. Marcus paused briefly outside the entrance before walking inside, carrying nothing more than his case file and the quiet understanding that justice is rarely defined by who speaks the loudest, but by who allows verified truth to lead the way. Several months later, the memory of that summer afternoon no longer lived in headlines or official reports. It lived in quieter places instead. It lived in revised training manuals resting on academy classroom desks. It lived inside new verification procedures followed before assumptions could become decisions. It lived in conversations between experienced officers and young recruits learning that professionalism begins with listening before judging. For Marcus Hayes, life slowly returned to the rhythm he had always valued. Each morning he walked through the glass entrance of the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office carrying the same leather briefcase, greeting the security officer with the same friendly smile, and beginning another day devoted to protecting people who would never know his name. Recognition had never been his goal. Service had always been enough. The public corruption investigation eventually reached its conclusion through months of careful legal work, verified financial evidence, and patient cooperation between federal prosecutors and honest local officials. The success of the operation never erased the difficult afternoon that delayed it, but it proved something Marcus had believed throughout his entire career. Truth might be delayed, but when protected by evidence and integrity, it eventually finds its way forward. One Saturday morning, long after the investigations and policy reviews had ended, Marcus drove with his daughter Emily to the Chesapeake Bay, just as they had done for years. The early sunlight shimmered across the calm water while seabirds drifted above the quiet shoreline. Emily unpacked fishing gear from the back of the truck before sitting beside her father on the wooden pier. After several peaceful minutes, she looked toward him and asked the question she had carried for weeks. She wanted to know how he had stayed so calm when so many people doubted him. Marcus smiled gently as he watched small waves roll against the weathered wooden posts beneath the dock. He told her that uniforms, titles, and badges were important because they represented responsibility, but character was even more important because it determined how those responsibilities were used. He explained that becoming angry would never have changed the facts, while patience allowed the facts to speak for themselves. Emily nodded thoughtfully, holding those words more carefully than any lesson found in a textbook. Across the city, officers beginning new academy classes studied real timelines demonstrating how one verification call could prevent enormous consequences. Supervisors reminded every recruit that confidence should always be supported by evidence, never substituted for it. Those lessons quietly influenced decisions that would never appear in newspapers because mistakes prevented rarely become public stories. As the afternoon sun slowly settled across the bay, Marcus packed the fishing equipment into the truck and looked across the peaceful water reflecting soft shades of gold and blue. The breeze carried the clean scent of salt water while distant sailboats moved silently toward the horizon. There was no applause waiting for him, no cameras following his footsteps, and no speeches celebrating what had happened. There was only the quiet satisfaction of knowing that dignity had remained stronger than prejudice, patience had remained stronger than assumption, and verified truth had strengthened the very institutions it was meant to protect. Marcus closed the truck door, started the engine, and drove home beside his daughter as the fading sunlight disappeared behind the trees, leaving only the steady sound of the road ahead and the silent comfort that justice had finally arrived exactly where it belonged.